Welcome to the Kriya Yoga Podcast, a source of inspiration and actionable education for those inspired towards the goal of enlightenment through yogic meditation. Through these interviews, discussions, and reflections, it is my intention to share the possibility of waking up to the reality of self and God realization, and to remind you of the immortal words of Paramahansa Yogananda. Don't look back. Don't look to the left or to the right. Look straight ahead to the goal and go all the way in this lifetime. I'm Ryan Kurczak, and I'll be your host on this adventure of spiritual self-discovery. Welcome back, everyone, to Season 2 of the Kriya Yoga Podcast. Today, we have Shalin Tetro, who's the owner of Living Lotus Ayurveda, and she's been doing that since 2005. She's a Vedic astrologer, Ayurvedic educator, mentor, and spiritual teacher as a Kriya Yogi, and she's also a NAMA-certified Ayurvedic doctor. Welcome, Shalin. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah. And so as an Ayurvedic doctor, you also specialize in a few things too, right?
Yeah, I work, I do see any type of patient with any type of illness, imbalance, or condition, but I do a lot of work working with fertility and pregnancy and the postpartum time as well. And then the other specialty that I focus on is something called Pancha Karma as well.
Okay. Yeah. So I think maybe today we'll spend a good bit of time on Pancha Karma. Now, I have a general idea of what that is, but I don't know how many other people do. So can you tell us what Pancha Karma is, what it means?
Sure. So Pancha Karma originally is a Sanskrit terminology. So Pancha means 5 and karma means actions, and it's kind of most basic sense of the word. And so there are 5 different therapies that are used in Ayurvedic medicine to work with a patient. It's a process of preparing, cleansing, and rejuvenating a patient. It's kind of like a journey. I very much consider it a journey. And it's the deepest set of therapies used in Ayurvedic medicine.
Well, my experience with Ayurvedic medicine is that if there's something wrong, you should eat a lot of ghee and take triphala. Is that in there?
That's definitely in there. Yeah. That's definitely a big part of it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we can get into the specifics of that. But I'm curious, Ayurveda being a sister science to Jyotish and yoga, how does a Panchakarma treatment, or how does that process help a person spiritually speaking on their path?
Well, the way I see it is, Ayurveda is one of the Vedic sciences that really focuses on supporting a person and an individual to live out in the longest, in terms of their longevity, their wellness. We help to support that so that they can live out their personal path or their dharma. Mm-hmm. It's the science of longevity and wellness. And so if we can help support a patient to have the highest level of health for themselves and the longest level of life for themselves, that provides more opportunity for them to grow spiritually. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important. It can help reduce their physical suffering. It can help reduce certain mental, emotional tendencies that a person can grapple with. And so it helps to, I think, pave a way.
Yeah. So it gives them the time and the opportunity, assuming they're going to take the opportunity to actually go into their meditation practice.
Yes. Yeah. I think, and it can help remove, movements of the mind, for example, or if someone has a chronic illness that may, at some points in their spiritual journey, take them out of the ability to do their practices. It can help alleviate that so they can return to it. Now, in saying that, I know a person can be on a spiritual path without any strong level of health, right? Mm-hmm. So the two aren't necessarily bound in that way.
Yeah. But most people, they would get way distracted if they were dealing more with health issues, right?
Yeah, they could be. Exactly. Yeah.
So can you tell us specifically what are these 5 actions, these 5 activities in Pancha Karma?
Sure. And they're not not every patient goes through all 5. So just to say that it depends on what they need. what imbalances they're dealing with. And they can sound kind of intense, but again, this is a journey we take people on. So there are processes that involve cleansing or expelling basically imbalances and something we call ama out of the body. So they're going to be processes that evacuate or move things from the body. Okay. So I'm going to start with the one that's, I guess, most intense. There's something called vamana, which is therapeutic vomiting.
Okay.
That, of course, sounds very intense, right? It's not intense like if you're ill. It's a much different experience. And again, it's not for everybody. Then there is virechana, which is a type of purgation. So basically, the person is eliminating many, many times after given a lot of preparation and certain herbal formulations, a lot of evacuating, elimination in one day.
Okay.
Yeah. There's Rakta Moksha, which is, I don't do this in my practice, but I will send people to donate blood. So it's bloodletting.
Right.
So the way to work with that in this country is donating blood. Mm-hmm. And then there's nasya, so oleation and cleansing of the nasal passages. And then bastis, which are a series of enemas. So clearing, cleansing out the lower intestine.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is that all 5?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Amana, virechana, nasya, basti, bloodletting. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So it's mainly about just getting things out of the body, it seems like.
Well, it's actually a threefold process.
Okay.
So, and when I work with patients, if they're not guided very specifically with these parts, they wander off, usually the third part. But the first part is preparation. So you need to prepare. The patient needs to prepare for the second part, which are the cleansing therapies. Mm-hmm. And then for the third part, it's a rejuvenative part. So it's a 3-part process.
Okay. And how long does it usually take for something like this?
Again, it depends on the person. So anywhere from as little to about 2.5 weeks to as long as a couple of months.
Wow.
However, that person for a good chunks of that time can still go about daily life.
Okay. And so is this also related to that idea of like Kaya Kalpa, or is that a whole different thing?
Can you go over what Kaya Kalpa is?
It's that experience of basically recreating your body so that you can continuously live forever.
Oh, yeah. It seems very much akin to that. I think in terms of yoga, from what I've read, there's very extreme processes of sort of like through fasting and these kinds of things, like bringing the body down to like its barest essentials.
Right.
And then building it up. This is, I would say, a version of that. Yeah. And for some people, I can go very deep into that process, and others, depending on what their ability and needs are, it's a much gentler, lighter process. Mm-hmm. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that answered the question. And I've never actually done Pancha Karma myself, even though I've known Ryan Strong forever and Vishnu Das. I've known quite a lot of Ayurvedic practitioners. And I guess in my mind, I was imagining, kind of going into this experience and doing what you're talking about, a lot of the cleansing practices, but also, massages with herbal powder rubs and putting like ghee in your eye and all that kind of stuff. Is that part of Pancha Karma too, or is that just a whole other thing?
It is. It's a large part of it. And that's one of the reasons why I love it, because with my practice as an Ayurvedic doctor, I really like to be hands-on and kind of going through the journey with the patient. Mm-hmm. It helps inform me as to what's going on for them. But yes, in the preparation part, the first part of Pancha Karma and the second part, there's a lot of body therapies that happen in conjunction with the cleansing processes, because you have to prepare the body tissues themselves to be ready to release. And you do that by oiling, like doing like heavy oleation if you think of qualities of oil, it softens and loosens things, makes things more pliable. Mm-hmm. And then there's another process of fomentation, which is like heating up the body and creating like sweating, mm-hmm. Which dilates the shrotas or the channels of the body. And so there's a lot of, pouring warm oil on the body, doing specific therapeutic massage techniques to help kind of wring and squeeze things that are lodged, ama that's lodged in the tissues, bringing it into circulation and then, sweating and then evacuating. It's a journey.
Yeah. I guess it makes me wonder, whenever I've led retreats and stuff, I always notice that if it's a 5-day retreat or a 7 or 10-day retreat, it always seems that about 3 or 4 days into the retreat, that's when people start having their little freakouts and breakdowns.
Exactly. Yes.
So I'm curious with this whole process, if you're kind of moving a lot of things and kind of trying to restore the body, what comes to mind is almost like that saying from the Bible, you can't put old wine in new bottles or something like that.
Exactly.
How does your approach and how does Ayurveda address that process, like that psychological part of it?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's very similar to what you've experienced when you support people in your retreats. It is around the same time too, that 3 or 4 day mark, where the person is removed from their daily lives and habits and relationships. So they have that quiet, right? They have that time and that space. And then on a physical level, there's the loosening up of ama. And I brought that up a few times already. But with our life experiences, so experiences that we have, with thoughts that we think, with food that we eat, if we're not digesting them properly, and there's many reasons why that could happen, that could be a whole other topic. There's a substance that begins to form and coalesce in the body called ama. It's like this sticky substance that can get lodged in the different tissues of the body. And this also happens like with our experiences. If we have a certain emotional response to an experience and we don't express it properly or just freely, that can get lodged in our body too, in specific organs. There's a tendency, for example, for anger to get lodged in our liver, for example. So when we start going in with herbs and specific foods and oils to start to loosen and open up the tissues, those emotions and experiences that get stuck in the body, they start expressing. So people definitely will, and it's different for every person. So it keeps my work interesting. That's when stuff starts to come out. And so I try to counsel them on expecting that, because I think that helps. I do like to leave people to have their experiences as much as they can, but I think a little bit of foresight is helpful. Hey, this is normal. This is part of it. I don't know exactly what may happen for you. Everyone has their own individual experiences, but things start oozing out. Oozing out. And because I'm the director, the head doctor there, the focus, comes back on me, where they may say they had a difficult relationship with a maternal figure. There might be some emotional things that will come out and project in that way. So and that's called transference.
Right.
What's that?
I think you're pretty safe to say that most people have difficulty with a maternal figure.
Maybe it's so not. Loaded, isn't it? It's so loaded, but I love being in that place where I can help support people to heal that, because on the other side of it, on the flip side of that mother wound, there's boundless acceptance and love. So it's a really cool process to see people go through that.
How does your I'm sure that when you're working with someone, you're probably looking at their astrological chart too, to kind of get a heads up maybe on what could pop out during those types of things. Is that true?
I do look at that. Sometimes I'll do a little bit of a reading with them. It really depends on the person. I try to get an understanding if they're open to that or not. But in any regard, it is helpful for me to see. So if I'll look at their moon and I'll see their tendencies of the moon and their mental stability or sensitivity. And it's so helpful. It's so helpful to look at that. see what time period they're in, yeah.
Do you find that people interested in Ayurveda and getting Pancha Karma often aren't interested in the astrology part of it?
No, but sometimes people will come and see me first by getting a deep tissue massage with no understanding of Ayurveda or Kriya or anything, Kriya Yoga or anything like that. So to start to see me as an Ayurvedic patient is a leap, right? So every once in a while, even taking that other leap to another science like Jyotish is another leap. So I just see where they're at. But you're right. Most people are open and receptive. Yeah. To all of the sciences.
I'm sure not everyone has, knowledge of Jyotish and astrology and so on, but I know a lot of listeners do. I'm kind of curious when you kind of consider looking at their chart, are there specific things you look at for, issues with anger or issues with anxiety and so on that someone might be able to say, oh yeah, that makes sense to me? Sure.
So would you like, just some illustrations in the chart? So I look at the 8th house for any chronic health issues, if there's like a fire sign there with a fiery planet or something like that, I'll know to work with these deep-rooted anger issues that may be there. Looking at the 6th house of health, if there's any planets there, if there's Venus there, I know need to attend to like their reproductive health or their thyroid or something like that. So yeah, it's really helpful. Or if someone's moon is in a very like fragile state, 12th house or something, I'll know not to push them too much with the physical processes because they may not have the mental stamina to really handle that. So it might be a softer approach just to help to support that moon that tends to kind of be a little less stable. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does. And I don't know what got me thinking. It might be the lovely Larimar pendant that you're wearing, but I'm curious if you use do you ever use like specific gemstones or crystals within the process too, or is that a little too far?
No, it's not too far at all. I tend not to work with gemstones too much. Like I said, I love things that are esoteric and subtle. If I do that, it's more with working with color and sound. It's more like there's so many things to learn. So I tend not to work with gems all that much. But I will work a little bit with mantra or really trying to give a person practical applications in their life. Like here are some suggestions that you can apply to your own life when you leave this experience that you can continue on for yourself. Not to say that crystals and gemstones don't work. I think they do. And because my knowledge of them is modest, I know to respect that and not bring it into my practice at this point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you know enough to know that you don't know.
I need to respect it. Yeah.
That's good.
And to keep harnessing the things that I am strong at, like working with my hands on a person, doing marma therapy and doing all of the bodywork therapies, working with herbs and with mantra and meditation, those kinds of things.
Yeah. So when you mentioned people going off when they're done and kind of staying with it and so on. So what does it look like? For example, if I was going to come and have Pancha Karma with you, like what would that generally look like? Would I be staying somewhere that, do you have like a place to stay, or do they stay at home and kind of do it on their own? How's that work?
Yeah, I do. I used to only have people come on site to a retreat place that I owned. I currently don't own a place, but now I rent a place that's nearby to my office. That's my preferred way of working with people. I think that it can be the most effective is to have a person remove themselves from their normal everyday. It's really strong and powerful to do that. So that's the way that I prefer to work with people. And then they will stay on, I just call it on site, between 7 to 10 days. I have had a patient stay for 3 weeks. She did all the different sections with me. But just because of availability, I usually do a 7 to 10 day time period. And so they're doing the first stages of preparation at home.
Okay.
Then they'll come on site for 7 to 10 days. And then it'll be a couple of weeks of the rejuvenation return at home as well. So that's one way, and that's my preferred way of working.
Yeah.
I've had patients who will rent like an Airbnb near my office, come in for the body therapies and counseling, and so I can check on them. They go back to the Airbnb and they prepare their own food via my recommendations. That works pretty well too, because it's still taking someone out of their usual environment.
Right.
And
so after going through the process, what then? Just what then after you've gone
what then? That's kind of where actually Ryan Strong and I, my partner, we've talked a lot about this. That's where the potential for the real work begins, because I think you talked about that example of was it old wineskin, new wine?
Yeah. Right.
I always think of it as like a clear canvas. What are you going to paint on it now that you return? And so that experience can be different for many people. I do counsel people after when they return, checking in on them because they're on a modified diet for a period of time. It's about bringing foods back in slowly. So that's a whole process. Often people will have certain attachments or cravings for different foods. After Pancha Karma, those attachments and cravings are much, much less. So it's a really good opportunity for that person then to move forward from that place with like a better habit in terms of how they nourish themselves, because it's easier. They've already been through the difficult part, right? So a lot of the cravings are subsided for them. Yeah. And then they also may start to have a little bit more clarity, because Pancha Karma does provide, it clarifies the mind. It produces more sattva in the mind. It allows them to sort of take a look at their relationships and how they want to live their life. And is it attuning to how they're feeling in the present moment? So it provides a lot of clarity. And that can be hard, because it's like, oh, now I have to go and potentially make these changes. Right. That are now clearer to me that I need to attend to.
Right. I mean, I remember I was reading, I think it was The Science of God Realization, one of Roy's books. And he talked about that one of the real difficulties with our spiritual path is that we kind of want to stay the same, but still have spiritual growth happen. Like we don't really want to change important things in our life. And what you just mentioned there, I'm curious, do you tell them, or do they know, or where does it come from, that once we go through this, that you are really going to have to take a look at the choices, the people you spend time with, the foods you eat, because if you don't, you're just going to go right back to where you were.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of people come to me because they're seeking change, and this helps to facilitate that. It provides clarity.
Yeah.
And I do provide some counseling in the beginning that goes over that, right? But of course, being prepared mentally is different than actually going back into life and then having to do the thing. There's a series of questions that Ryan has developed that I use in my work. There are a series of questions that I ask the patient to reflect upon during the Pancha Karma that helps prepare them for the future. So there's self-reflective questions similar to what Mr. Davis talks about in his Creative Imagination book. Yeah. But some of the questions that we explore is like, what do you like about yourself? Some people have a really hard time with it. Some people don't.
Right.
What relationships would you like to see differently, or how have certain relationships served you or caused you difficulty? Things like this. Yeah, it's really helpful in terms of preparing.
Yeah. And so I'm assuming you do, but do you work with a lot of people specifically, like on the Kriya Yoga path, who are just making what you offer just part of their path itself?
In terms of like a regular, like coming for Pancha Karma regularly?
Yeah.
Yep. There's definitely some people that do that for sure. Yeah. So they'll go into retreat, deep in their meditation practice. It's a wonderful opportunity because they're mostly on their own. So they'll see myself usually once a day, sometimes twice. And then they'll see one of my assistants either coming in to prepare the food in the morning. And we usually keep more of an atmosphere of quietude so that they're not distracted by the interesting conversations that can happen. Yeah. So their interaction with other people is present, but it's altered. It's like it's very specific to create that space of deeper spiritual practice if they wish. Mm-hmm. So I encourage meditation or whatever practices the person is doing during that time.
Does pranayama play a particular role in the process?
So again, it depends on the person's experience level. So if it's a Kriya yogi coming in or someone else that's on a different enlightenment path, often if they don't have a regular pranayama practice, I will then either offer them suggestions on what to start to practice with. And I help to, if they're newer in the practice, I'll help them to set up a kind of a schedule. Okay, first go for a walk, try to do it at this time, then come back, practice this type of pranayama, do your meditation and kriya, that kind of thing, or mantras before meditation. But yeah, I help them to sort of reorganize their practice if they need that guidance.
Yeah.
Yes, but pranayama is definitely, we go over pranayama. Yeah.
I'm curious with the process. A lot of people, when they first start practicing Kriya Yoga specifically, because there's a lot of body awareness, like with the central channel, the Sushumna, and also the chakras and so on. A lot of folks, many will have an experience of the process, meaning that they feel that current moving through the spine, or they're able to focus on the chakras themselves. Right. But some people, I think, don't necessarily have the greatest body awareness, and so it doesn't quite happen that way. And so when you go through Pancha Karma, would that be helpful for them to also experience that more deeply, those kinds of processes?
To experience the Kriya practices?
Yeah, like the sensations of the current moving through the spine, or even being able to focus on the chakras specifically and so on.
Yeah. So the more subtle work isn't completely focused on unless the person already has an established practice. Because when you're going through Pancha Karma, because it's a cleansing process, we have to be mindful that we do naturally deplete something called ojas when we're having the patient go through Pancha Karma.
Tell us what that is.
Yeah, ojas is our physical, mental, emotional stability. It's kind of the container that we have in our life. And so if our ojas is depleted, that container is not as stable. And so to work with anything that cultivates strong spiritual energy, that's not the time to do it unless the person already has a really strong practice, is already established in that practice. So someone that's new, I may introduce gentle pranayama at that time, but nothing too elaborate.
Right. I mean, it seems important to go through all of this before you get involved in things like intensive pranayama, because if the ojas or the life force or the container isn't really strong, you're not really going to be able to tap into the potential of it.
It'll be more difficult. Yeah, it provides an opportunity. So Pancha Karma, it helps to remove what I said before, ama. So improperly digested food, thoughts, emotions, and experiences. It helps us to clear that from the body. And then in that third phase of Pancha Karma, we're rebuilding the body. And at that point, we're rebuilding ojas. We're strengthening and fortifying ojas. So that container is more stable for prana to move through.
Yeah. I mean, I've noticed, this is kind of going off a little bit here, but I've noticed that particularly when I've done a fast, like a juice fast or something like that for a couple of days, usually about a day and a half in, when I'm doing pranayama or some form of meditation, it feels like it's almost effortless.
Because you're so light. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
that makes sense.
Is that part of this process, or is this just sort of a lightheadedness that I'm experiencing because I'm not eating any food?
could be a combo of the two. But no, you're right. It does create that lightness of being, for sure. Especially if you have an established practice like you do. And I'm assuming that your ojas is fairly stable. Not everyone should do a juice fast, but if you have enough stability in ojas and kapha, then it's appropriate enough for that earthy quality.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this whole experience, I know that people can come to you or see Ryan Strong and so on for that. And we'll talk about how to get in contact with you before we finish up. But what do you recommend maybe people do to tap into this just on their own? You know, like if they're not necessarily going to do a 7-day, 10-day experience, if they're just going to incorporate it. Because I remember, Mr. Davis, he always smelled like sesame oil.
Wonderful.
Every time I gave him a hug, he always like the smell was like incense and sesame oil. And I'm pretty sure every day he gave himself, a sesame oil massage and so on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. So Pancha Karma is sort of the end all be all deepest set of journey that you can go through in Ayurvedic medicine. But then there's something called Dinacharya. So Dinacharya means daily practices. And again, they're very practical. It's very empowering to the person because you're doing them for yourself. So they're daily self-care routines. And so just like you illustrated with noticing that smell of sesame oil, and Mr. Davis is, you can do something called Abhyanga, which is self-oil massage. And ideally, most of these practices are done in the beginning of the day. So it's kind of like preparing you for the day. And it's, it's one of these things you practice over a long period of time. And over time, you'll see more and more results for your health. So Abhyanga massage, it's you warm, plain, unrefined, organic, cold pressed sesame oil is perfect. There's a whole variety of other oils you can use, but that's a really great foundational start. You do it in the morning before you bathe, which is kind of counterintuitive a little bit. But basically, head to toe, you're putting oil on your body, and that wakes up your body. It gets your circulation and lymph moving. You do rub your abdomen, so it helps to move your digestion and elimination. It kind of wakes you up, wakes up your body. Also, there's that quality of self-care that a lot of people don't think about that is actually very calming and nurturing for your nervous system.
Yeah.
So even though you're doing the massage for yourself, just that sense of touch with the oil is very calming and grounding.
Yeah.
So that's a really great
before you would take a shower or a bath.
Yeah. Now you have to dedicate it, like a towel that you don't mind getting a little bit oily. You have to clear your drain with baking soda and vinegar, once a month just to keep the drains clear, that kind of thing. But it's a very worthwhile investment. You can take your time with it, but if in reality you've got a lot going on, just a few minutes, just getting the oil on like for 2 minutes is still beneficial.
And where would the neti pot fall into that? Is that also?
Yeah, so that's part of Dinacharya. So kind of clearing the sense organs and rejuvenating the sense organs. So for your sense of touch, that would be the Abhyanga. Neti pot, that's clearing, sense of smell. But you also do that in the morning as well, first thing, ideally. Yeah. Whenever you clear your nasal passages, it also benefits your eyes and your ears as well.
So it's a 1 for 3.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe even 4. I think even sense of taste. Everything gets clear. It gets cleared. You're helping to gently clear ama by doing that.
Well, the tongue scraper is for the taste. Yeah.
Yep. So there's tongue scraping, which again, that's before you eat. So it's one of the first things that you do. And 3, you take a metal. You want to use metal. And I think there's plastic ones for sale, but you want to use stainless steel or copper. You gently scrape the tongue, 3 to 5 passes on the tongue. Yeah. And it's one of those things, it's a practice that it may sound like, oh, that's not really going to be helpful or that's strange. And then once you do it, and then if you stop doing it, like if you travel and you forget your tongue scraper, you're like, oh, I feel incomplete. I have my tongue scraper.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Well, people who are, regular meditators, Kriya yogis, and so on, what is the most important thing that you think they should know about, or maybe be doing for themselves, just to support their practice? I know it's different for everybody, but if there was some kind of
I think I could maybe think about 3, because I'm trying to think of like 3 major tendencies on a physical, emotional level that people present with. So if you're dealing with tendencies that are more heated, have more heat, like like red inflammatory skin qualities for yourself, or your eyes get red and heated, or if you're prone to like angry outbursts and anger is your go-to reactivity that you're working with, becoming more conscious of, you can then use the opposite quality of coolness. So
ice baths. No, too far.
No, cooling baths. You know, I am intrigued by ice baths, but that's definitely not for everybody.
Yeah.
Again, a person needs to have a good amount of ojas to withstand that experience.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Keep going.
No. I'm just laughing because I bet you do ice baths.
I do ice baths. Yeah.
Yeah, and they definitely have benefits. I've tried that kind of cold therapy, and I can see the benefit, but it's not for everybody.
Right.
But cool baths, or, in the early morning hours when it's still cool outside, if you're in a hot climate, going into like a moving river where there's the coolness of the water, that's going to help bring balance for yourself if you have that tendency. Kind of on the opposite, if a person is dealing with a lot of coldness in their body, they're always feeling cold, they have a hard time keeping weight on, they deal with a lot of anxiety as a tendency that they're really trying to bring awareness to, they're going to want to employ Abhyanga massage would be great. Warming that oil, and oil has a heavy quality. So putting a warming oil, the sesame oil, adding warming herbs to it also would be helpful, for example, and doing it every morning at the same time, creating that stability. Anxiety tends to have a lot of movement to it. Right. So something that's stable. And then for people that are very earthy and can get very stuck. Now, it's hard to get people who are very stuck and rigid to move.
Right.
But those people would benefit from like a cold plunge in the morning, or a very brisk walk outside, or even like a little bit of a sprint in the morning, to kind of help to mitigate those qualities of stuckness.
Yeah. And I'm guessing these are pretty much lined up with sort of the Vata Pitta Kapha idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember the heated being Pitta, Vata being more the cold and anxious, and then Kapha being more the heavy and still. Mm-hmm.
I remember reading some material from David Frawley. I think it was David Frawley. So I apologize if I'm misquoting this, but it seemed to say, oh no, actually it might not have been him, but it was while I was reading lots of Ayurvedic texts, and I read someone say that with a Vata type, you really have to hold their hand and kind of keep encouraging them. You have to be ready to continue to tell them why they're doing it and why it's important. And with a Pitta type, you just simply have to appeal to their reason and their logic. You describe it to them. If they understand why it's important, then they'll just do it on their own most of the time, I guess. And with Kapha people, you have to scare the hell out of them.
Yeah, really motivate them in an extreme way.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, I could see how that could work. Yeah. Usually with Kapha people, the way to motivate them is through saying, if you don't attend to these physical, mental, emotional areas in your life, it's going to affect your family.
Yeah, that's probably a better way to approach it.
But no, you can scare people too. Like any way that works. As long as you're not creating further imbalance,
Exactly. Yeah, no more
there's
trauma.
There's many ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Sure. Well, we're nearing the end of our time. I'm curious, is there anything else you'd like to share with people, things that we haven't quite discussed or you're inspired?
Gosh, there's so much. Yeah, there's so much to discuss. With Pancha Karma, it's, like I said, it's not necessarily for every single person. So you can do modified practices. I think you had asked me earlier about like what are some other things that people can do. You can do a very mild, gentle, modified cleanse at home if you want, for about 3 days, where you're just eating very, very simply and slowing down your work commitments, taking that dedicated time, similar as you would if you were taking a few days to do more deeper spiritual practices. It would be the same, but on a physical level.
Is that the top? That's not the topic of your book that you're working on. Is it something?
No, the book that I'm writing and almost ready to publish. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
It's a textbook for students, for Ayurvedic students and practitioners. And the specific subject is Ayurveda and pregnancy.
Okay. Do you have the title for the book so when people hear the podcast, they can find it?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's Garbhavati, which means pregnancy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Garbhavati. Yeah.
Yes. It'll be published on Amazon. So that should be coming out within the next few months.
All right.
And then my co-author and I, Mary Thompson, will be teaching. We have coursework that's related to the textbook as well. So,
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be sure to get the contact information. We'll stick it in the bottom of the comment section so people can find it.
Great.
Do you have any recommendations for general books, for these kind of
I know,
irregular practices?
Yeah, so many people ask me, and it's such a good question. There's a book that Dr. Lad wrote in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's called Ayurveda, The Science of Self-Healing. And it's just a little paperback book, and I believe it's still in print. And that can be helpful because he does go into the Ayurvedic theory a little bit. So you for the Pitta people, you can get your satisfaction by learning about Ayurvedic theory, the science of it. But then he does go into the Dinacharyas. So that would be a helpful book to look into for sure.
Good. Yeah. I'll see if I can find that on Amazon and stick a link in the comment section as well.
Oh, great. Yes.
And so if people want to get a hold of you or work with you, do you have a website they can find?
Sure. So they can either Google Living Lotus Ayurveda. It's pretty long.
Yeah.
Or at the moment, my website is my first name and last initial. So shalint.com.
Okay. Well, we'll stick that there so people can find it too. They can just click on it. But Living Lotus Ayurveda, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it was great that you could be here today. We really appreciate it, Shalin.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. It was really good to talk.
And maybe we can schedule another podcast in the future to talk about some of the deeper aspects of this whole process.
That would be great. Yeah, I can share some stories, and I've had some really beautiful patients who have taken the journey.
I'm
great.
sure.
Yeah.
I might know one or two of them.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, it was good talking to you.
Thank you. Take care, Ryan.
Be well.
Bye.